Another Sunday gone by where the Cardinals can't finish off a series. And it's time to put the team's handling of Matthew Liberatore back under the microscope. Coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is Sunday, May 19th, 2024. Cardinals once again can't win a game on a Sunday. They are 1-7 in Sunday games this year. Hat tip to John Denton of MLB.com, his article for that statistic. I wouldn't have known it off the top of my head, but it does kind of feel that way, right? The Cardinals have struggled to close out series. We know that. And, of course, Sunday is the day of the week that a lot of series do come to an end. The three-game weekend set, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Cardinals win the first two against Boston, and then they lay an egg on Sunday. A dud, 11-3. Cardinals fall to the Red Sox at Busch Stadium. Tyler O'Neill announcing his presence in the series. You knew it would happen eventually. A 3-0 home run against Matthew Liberatore in the first inning. He was swinging all the way in the 3-0 count. I was looking at that at bat as it was taking place, and I'll explain my perspective of the game today. I was at the game, but I wasn't working it. But I was up there in left field, nicely shaded under the awning high up there, and I was looking 3-0, and I thought, if he throws him a strike, it's probably a home run. And sure enough, probably should have just walked him. But the Red Sox win at 11-3. Cardinals didn't really get enough going offensively, but it was just constantly being peppered by the Red Sox offense that really cost the Cardinals this game today. And it leads us into a conversation again where I think we have to discuss the team's handling of Matthew Liberatore and the fact that it has just been an abject disaster to this point in the young pitcher's career. Left-hander, we know he came over in the Randy Arozarena trade. Kid's only 24 years old still, but we're going on, year 3 at this point of the will he, won't he, in terms of can Matthew Liberatore stick in the rotation. And I think that's the long and short of the narrative for most people, but I don't really see it that way. I don't see it as an indictment upon Matthew Liberatore that, again, today he was unable to be effective in a starting role for the Cardinals. He pitched into the fourth but could not record any outs in the fourth. Gave up 4 total runs, all of them earned, 6 hits, 1 walk, 3 Ks in 3+ innings of work. The ERA now for the season is up to 5.40, and Liberatore threw 70 pitches. So he threw 50 in his first start, 60 or so in his second start, and then 70 today. I think this one's going to be his last start for a while, though, for the Cardinals. I don't know if that means send him down and keep him stretched out, or if they've got enough guys that are currently doing that down there in Memphis. But I guess if you do, why couldn't one of them be in the rotation now? Instead, you've had Liberatore kind of halfway in the rotation, halfway out, also be ready to relieve at a given notice. It's been brutal. It's been the complete opposite of what you would want to do to try and handle effectively a young pitcher to get the most out of him, in my opinion. You're really setting him up to fail, and I think the Cardinals are probably going to reverse course on it at this point, it sounds like. We'll play some audio from Oli Marmol here in a moment from postgame. It seems to me like they're going to make a different decision, but I'm fascinated to see what it's going to be because, again, they have just been so hamstrung and so terrified to just make a decision on, hey, this is the guy that's our starting rotation depth in Memphis. He's the next man up. We're going to bring him up like you do when you have a need in a rotation spot. And we're going to have this guy see what he's got. And the Cardinals it's been just paralysis by overanalysis, it feels like, where they just don't want to make the wrong move. And so they've elected to this point to make no move. And now it's resulted in Matthew Liberatore's season kind of being derailed after he started really well in the bullpen in a relief role where the Cardinals planned out of spring training, hey, this is what you're going to do. But then, we're in the middle of May. It's only 6-7 weeks later, and, they're trying him out as a starter, which is something that I supported and said was okay to do, but you also understand the ramifications of what that's going to bring, to the guy himself when he's been preparing as a reliever and pitching as a reliever, and now you're just going to ask him to turn around and, hey, go be a starter. I don't know much, but it doesn't seem like a very solid strategy conducive to success to be whipping a guy back and forth between roles. And not only have they done that within the context of the season, started as a reliever, now he's starting, but they've been doing it like in the middle of him starting. Started the first game, it was like a bullpen game, 50 pitches, and 4 days later he was pitching in relief 3 days after that, so technically short rest, but not really because it wasn't a full start, but still it's not a consistent schedule. He was starting again. I mean, he's been a reliever in the middle of his starts. And I just don't understand it. I just don't understand. I understand why you feel compelled to do it because there are needs. And if you're carrying an arm on the pitching staff and you go 8 days between starts, you might as well use that guy to give you a little coverage if you can. It kind of came back to bite the Cardinals when they did it because that game that Liberatore threw in relief, he wasn't effective. But they were just trying to get something out of him, which I get. That was against Milwaukee on May 10th. But he started May 5th, and then May 10th, when it would be your day to start, they're like, okay, you can throw in relief. Didn't go well. Short outing. Only recorded 1 out. But then 3 days later, he's making another start. I mean, it's just bonkers to me. And today, he was on more of a normal turn, normal rest, and just wasn't effective in a game. But when you're not effective in a role like this, it's going to compound the problem, and it's going to make it look even worse than it was because you're not built up to 100 pitches. So you can't pitch through anything and then throw a scoreless 5th inning, right? Like you don't have a chance to really salvage an outing. The moment you run into trouble, your pitch count goes berserk, and that's basically the end of the line. And that's what happened to Liberatore today in the 4th inning, which, again, he wasn't effective, so I can't take all of the responsibility for this off of his plate and just absolve him completely. But I really just think it's been a rough way for the Cardinals to go about it. And I understand. A few days ago, I was saying, look, make your decision and decide what you're going to do with him. And if you're going to put him in the rotation, that's fine. But you got to acknowledge you got to build him up. And then that puts strain on the bullpen. Even if he has a nice outing, goes 4-5, you're still asking more of your bullpen, which makes it a little bit difficult. Well, now it sounds like the Cardinals are going to reverse course and have Matthew Liberatore go back to a relief role. And for more on that, we will give you some audio from Cardinals manager Oli Marmol. This is courtesy of MLB.com. I'm going to play this off of the MLB.com page, courtesy technically of Roku, because that was the channel the game was on today. Don't even get me started on that. But this is Cardinals manager Oli Marmol talking a little bit about Matthew Liberatore, and let me know if you can hear it in his voice what the plans could be for him, for Libby, beyond Sunday's start, which didn't go very well.
Fairness to Libby as well. I mean, this is a guy that's settling into a bullpen role and doing a really nice job. He's filling a need for us, and I appreciate the way he's handled it because that's not an easy thing to do. I think we were pretty clear when we left spring training. We were wanting to assign roles and guys show up every day knowing what we expect out of them and understanding how to prepare for that specific role. We've asked them to do multiple things, and I'm not going to sit here and say Libby doesn't have the ability to start because deep down I actually feel like he does. It's just a matter of how patient we want to be every 5 days and getting them to the point where that's the case. But out of the pen, you definitely see the velo tick up. Like he's not 92, 93 like he was today. You're seeing more 5s and 6s, and that makes a big difference when you're gearing up for 96 and that cutter and the combination of the breaking ball. I mean, it's real, right? So
there's Cardinals manager Oli Marmol explaining the thought process when it comes to Matthew Liberatore, starter versus reliever, and saying the same things that we have heard and that we have known to be true for some time about Liberatore. That he attacks when he's in the bullpen. He's throwing harder. He's more of a bulldog out there because he doesn't feel like he has to conserve anything for those shorter burst outings. And they haven't been able to figure out how to get that from him in longer bursts and have it translate to a successful run in the rotation. I think the problem with this is we're never really going to know because the Cardinals have not set this up in a way that to where it makes sense. They haven't set it up in a way that allows Liberatore to truly, without, you'd call it excuses, but without the explanations or excuses of, well, he's not built up and he's been kind of gone back and forth. Like if you really were the Cardinals and you wanted to know for sure what Liberatore was and could be, I would think you would prioritize it to make sure that you're putting him in a spot to where he could succeed as a starter. And if he didn't succeed, you could say, all right, it's definitive. He just doesn't have the makeup to do it. But I don't think you can definitively say that. And Oli, in that quote there that you heard, didn't definitively say, oh, Libby just can't be a starter. He described what makes him, at this point in his career, more effective as a reliever than as a starter, which are things we already knew. But he also says, I really do think he would be able to do it, but it's a question of how long are we going to be able to wait to every fifth day, see what that looks like, and allow for that growth process to take place. And it's not even Liberatore's fault, but the Cardinals have put him in a spot where hey, here's your audition to be a starter, man. You're 24 years old. Here's your audition. You're going to throw 50 pitches. You're a reliever. You're a straight 1 inning, maybe 2 inning reliever. Go out and start. You've got 50 pitches. Be as efficient as you can, and also attack, and also try to get deep into the game as much as you can, because we don't want to screw the bullpen. Okay, fine. Does a nice job of that. Hey, 5 days later, we need you in the bullpen, but 3 days after that, you are going to have to start. So just keep that in mind. Well, no, I know, but you just relieve, but no, you're going to start in 3 days. Yeah, it's not really short rest. Doesn't count because you only threw to a few batters, so it doesn't really count as short rest. So go ahead and make that, and you'll get 60 pitches this time, and then 5 days later, we'll give you a shot. It'll be a real shot, but that'll be like about 70 pitches will be the limit for that. And, good luck, man. I think it's going to be great. Like, it just feels so haphazard, the way the Cardinals have lined this up with Matthew Liberatore. And it almost feels, and it's not this, but it feels designed to get the result that they want, which is him back in the bullpen. Like, if we've heard about how much they like him in the bullpen, it's almost like the result and the way that it's played out is, well, if he's bad in the rotation, at least we can get him back in the bullpen where we really want him. But that's so backwards. And why I say, like, that's not what's actually happening here, is that there'd be no benefit to the Cardinals to, like, they're not tanking his opportunity so that they can pigeonhole him into the bullpen, because if they wanted to do that, they could just pigeonhole him into the bullpen to begin with. They wouldn't need to have the justification. So it's like they're so terrified of making a decision that, Liberatore, we don't want to really close the door on him being a starter, and since he's looked so good as a reliever, let's give him a run as a starter. But we also might need him as a reliever sometimes too, because we've got needs on this team, and also we're trying to get into the contenders circle here, and we want to be competitive in this division. But since we haven't been, we've got even less margin for error. So he really is going to need to do a great job. I mean, it's just not a situation conducive to a guy succeeding. To me, the way they've handled this young pitcher is almost to a T the way I would do it if I were intentionally trying to see a young pitcher fail. And it's not what I'm saying that's what they're doing. I just think their decision-making is that bad. Their decision-making from the highest level of the organization has been on this issue that bad. I don't understand it. And they're gonna change course now. If you heard that quote from Oli Marmol, they're going to change course. He's not going to stay in the rotation. It seems like there's going to be a move made. And look, with the way that this game went today, 11-3, you had Roycroft have to try to cover, and he got lit up a little bit. Fernandez had to go multiple innings. He got touched up a little bit. Robertson had to go 3 innings. I don't know that all of those guys are on the roster tomorrow. I think Nick Robertson has done enough to deserve to stay, but I don't know what it ends up looking like. They're going to just need the innings. You used really 4 relievers today. If you're planning on putting Liberatore back into the bullpen, you've used a bunch of guys, and there's going to have to be a move at this point to see if you can't. Coming into an Orioles series, that lineup's not a joke. So I'm not exactly sure who's coming up, who's going to be going down, but you'd have to think with the innings that are going to be unavailable going into Monday and beyond out of that bullpen after what we saw Sunday, that there's going to have to be some moves. But I don't know. It's weird, man. Let me know, Cardinals fans, what you think of the Liberatore situation. And no, he wasn't successful today. But I just feel like the Cardinals are almost allowing past mistakes to repeat themselves in the way that they're handling young pitchers. I mean, does this not ring a bell with Jordan Hicks? Jordan Hicks again today was fantastic for the Giants. I think his ERA is now like 2.5 or something like that. In a starting role, he's been really, really good. 5 innings, 1 run allowed today. Is 2.38 is his ERA. That's ridiculously good. He's been very, very good. And the Giants are getting their money's worth and then some. I mean, imagine the Cardinals could have said, there was nothing to keep the Cardinals from going, you know what? We're going to give you this 4-year, $44 million contract, and we're going to give you that shot to be a starter. But would it have worked in St. Louis? I almost unequivocally think no. Because when the Cardinals allow young pitchers to try and turn from reliever back into a starter, they do it haphazardly. They do it like they did it with Hicks. You know, you can remember there were a couple of times where they started and said, all right, Hicks is going to be in the rotation, actually. And it was like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of upside there. But then he has a couple bad starts because he's not really fully stretched out. The team isn't really fully committed to giving him that chance. He's not, he has a couple of rough outings, and the Cardinals it's almost punitive, where they're like, yep, you didn't do it. You wanted to be a starter, but you didn't do good enough. We're pulling you from it. It's almost punitive, but that doesn't benefit the organization to be punitive against a player in the handling of the player. And it's not that they're doing it on a personal level to spite these guys. I just think their decision-making processes are that bad when it comes to being able to line up these decisions. And you might say, yep, another notch in the belt. Oli Marmol doesn't know what he's doing. This is a John Mozeliak thing through and through, if you ask my opinion. Because he's the guy that designs the entire thing. He's the one that is in charge of overseeing the front office, that drafts and develops and trades for the pitchers that are in that AAA rotation, most of whom are on the 40-man roster right now today, but somehow not one of them is more suitable to join the rotation than a Liberator when he's not built up and stretched out to start. So not only are you setting him up to fail and making it look like he wouldn't be capable of starting, when we honestly don't know that because they've just never given him a genuine runway to do the role. And again, if you think that's just me making excuses for Libby, I don't think that's the case. Look, compare it to Jordan Hicks. The same stuff. They did the same type of stuff with Jordan Hicks to where I think every Cardinal fan at the time thought, oh, Jordan Hicks is not a starter. It can never work. He doesn't, he's walking too many guys in a bullpen role. How is he supposed to be efficient enough to be a starter? I don't know. Ask the Giants. They figured it out. They saw within him the way to make that work. And boy, is it ever working now. So I don't put this on Oli Marmol. I'm putting it on the front office because I think Oli Marmol wanted Matthew Liberatore to be in the bullpen. It's not hard to read through the lines and hear the quotes and the things that he says when talking about Libby in the bullpen, man. Yeah, he gives him his due and says, I'm not saying he couldn't be a starter. It's just a question of how long we can afford to wait. And he has glowing reviews to give of his work in the bullpen. You don't think the manager of the team doesn't like having a guy like Liberatore doing what he was doing, another reliable lefty down there? And John King's pitched pretty decently too, so maybe that's 3 reliable lefties. As if you're Oli Marmol, that's more than you could even hope to ask for. Yes, I'll take that as a manager every time, but call me up a starter that can do it as the 5th man in the rotation. You're hamstringing a manager if you're the front office to continue to let Liberatore on 50, 60, 70 pitches try and build up on the fly. But that was their strategy. And look, it's nice in thought. In practice, it ends up going worse. I wasn't overly critical of it until today. I mean, I was in terms of I kept just saying make a decision, pick a lane was my process. But I wasn't ripping them for considering Liberatore as a starter possibility, even despite the fact that he wasn't built up. But it really is a game like today that shows you why it's not ideal. Because if he doesn't pitch well, all right, he gives up 3 runs, 4 runs, whatever it is, but he doesn't have the ability. He's not built up or stretched out to get you 95 pitches and get through the 4th and 5th inning on that. Even like there's no room, there's no margin for error, which puts the team in a bad spot and Liberatore in an unfair spot because most starters go into a game and they're going to have a little wiggle room to get out of a jam like that and then pitch through something and then come out on the other side of it and still give the team 5 innings. If you're at a 70 pitch count, you can't do that. You have to be so fine and so perfect. It's a hard thing to ask a young pitcher or any pitcher to do. And then let alone what it does to the bullpen, because it strains the bullpen in a major way when you only go 3+ innings. We're going to see the impact of that on Monday when they're making roster moves. I know people are tired of watching the kids struggle. I just feel like it's my duty to point out how similar it is to the Hicks stuff. because they were giving him a chance to start. But were they really? What the Cardinals are doing with Libby here, it shouldn't count as giving him a chance to start. Like, if you don't think he can start, that's okay. Bullpen him. But the way they've handled the young pitcher is just, it kind of boggles the mind at this point. You got to have that starting depth for a reason. If you don't believe in or trust what you have in the minors to fill out that fifth spot, then you got to own that. John Mozeliak's got to own that, right? And this dates all the way back to spring training, and I didn't think there was an obvious way for the Cardinals to add, like, expensive rotation depth. I know people would point to Jordan Montgomery. I've talked at length on this podcast about why that didn't make sense. That just wasn't going to happen. But even anybody else in a lower price bracket, if you're spending real money, you are at that point in a tier of pitcher that's going to have an expectation to be in a rotation wherever they sign. So to identify the right guy, and I'm not saying there weren't guys out there that would have made sense to identify and target, but the right guy who can be kind of a swing man that, yeah, you don't get to throw 6 guys in a rotation at a time, but you got Steven Matz in your rotation and you got guys, injuries are going to happen. How do you balance the notion of you got to have some protection versus you need to believe in the young guys that you have coming up? Because if not, what does that say about your drafting and development process? Nothing good. And right now I don't have a lot of good to say. Like, I think there are good things that Randy Flores has done. On the pitching side, it's very questionable under Randy Flores' tenure with the way they have drafted and developed starting pitchers. So these guys are at Memphis right now. One of them is going to have to come up and have a shot at it. If that guy can't pitch, and that's why the Cardinals have been so reluctant to go to another option, which by now Zach Thompson could be your option. He's been down there starting for long enough. But if that's the thought process about the guys that are coming up, your depth, so to speak, if that's how you feel about that group, then that's not a reflection of the field manager in St. Louis. That's not a reflection of the roster in St. Louis. That's just a reflection of the front office and their inability, refusal to adequately put together a group of depth options that are actually viable. Mozeliak thought they were viable, but he also didn't want to talk in spring training about the depth. He didn't want to talk about what could happen if things went wrong. He just wanted to talk about mainly liking the 5 that they had. Here's a question from February 14th, very beginning of spring training. I'm going to play this audio because I've referenced it before. At one point in time, I thought I had asked the question. It's actually Jimmy the Cat Hayes who asked the question. I asked a different question about the rotation that I'll read you the quote from the story that I wrote in mid-February. But this is the one that I think is the most interesting because the Cat asked him about the rotation depth, plain and simple. And when asked and confronted with, hey, how's your rotation depth? Here's what John Mozeliak felt was the answer to give.
When you look at your starting rotation, one of the things I think you guys look at is depth, because you guys have had to utilize your depth before. Do you guys feel you have enough depth there? Who are your main depth pieces?
Look, I think you always are going to be able to question depth. You're always an injury or two away from that being truly tested. But when you look at our starting 5, we feel pretty confident about that group. But then you also have guys like Liberator and Thompson that I think could do that as well. John Rahm is someone who started games for us last year. So, we do feel like there's 8, 9, 10 names that could fill that void if we needed to, but additional to the 5 starters. But, I hope that our 5 can go.
Hope that our 5 can go is basically the summary of John Mozeliak's view of the pitching depth coming into the season in the rotation. Hope that our 5 can go. It's not enough. It hasn't been enough. It's putting the Cardinals in a bind. It's derailing what had been a pretty productive season for Matthew Liberatore because they felt, and look, Liberator is the guy that's going to try to answer the bell no matter what. He's going to want that chance to start if you're going to give it to him. So he's not going to turn down the opportunity. But it also, sometimes you protect a player from themselves. Sometimes you're the management of the team. You put the player in a better position to succeed, recognize their talents and the skill set and what they're currently being asked to do and what they're built up to do, and decide their role accordingly. And the Cardinals, because the answer in February to, hey, what's your depth, was, I hope our 5 can go, that's what you're seeing here. And he mentioned John Rahm. He meant Drew Rahm. I had golf on the brain, I guess, when he answered that question. Liberatore and Thompson were the two other names that he gave. Well, as we know, though, Thompson ended up being that depth. They put him in the rotation. Liberatore ended up being in the bullpen to begin the year. That was the way that competition played out from spring. And so that's the route that they went. But then with Thompson, he was struggling for reasons that they said he lost too much weight or something. And so his mechanics were off. I mean, it's just a lot of weirdness, man. A lot of weirdness when your depth is John Rahm, Drew Rahm, who's now injured, Zach Thompson, who did start the year in the rotation for the Cardinals, but they sent him down because once Sonny Gray came back, he was in that same Liberatore limbo program, the one that Libby now finds himself in. Is he a starter? Is he a reliever? How do you get the most out of a guy? How do you keep a guy fresh? All these questions. So they sent down Zach Thompson to stay stretched out. He may do-si-do with Liberatore tomorrow. I have no idea what they're going to do. Maybe they go a real bold. You want to talk about something crazy? Maybe it could work, but maybe they go Tink Hence and they say, look, Tink Hence has been so good in Double-A that we're going to call him straight up to the big leagues because it would be kind of flashy and it would be a way to, I don't know, change the dynamic of the conversation. But it's like, all right, you've got these guys in AAA that you don't want to rush to the big leagues or you don't think can hack it there. If they don't think these guys like McGreevy and Graceffo can hack it for a spot start or to cover the fifth spot for a few weeks, whatever it is, or Adam Kloffenstein or Sam Robertson, like they've got a bunch of guys that a lot of them are on the 40-man, some of them aren't, but are going to need to be before too long with Rule 5 implications and such. But if none of these guys can do it, what are the Cardinals doing investing time in them still in AAA? AAA is supposed to be the feeder team to get these guys ready for when an exact opportunity like the one going on in St. Louis ends up knocking. The opportunity is knocking. They need to identify which pitcher from AAA can now come in and take a rotation spot. Instead, they're moving the chess pieces around, and they're trying to be the smartest guy in the room, and it's blowing up in their face over and over again. I think you could just end up having Liberatore in the bullpen, and that could be totally fine. He could revert back to being really, really good like he was. I don't know that they've ruined him with this. Hopefully not. But what I do feel like you sacrifice with this haphazard way of introducing Liberatore back into the rotation is the idea that they're ever going to do it again. Because they're going to be able to point to it and say, see, it didn't work when we did it. This guy just can't do it. We tried. We really tried. But he just can't do it. So they'll relegate him to relief. Well, I can't wait 4 years from now or whatever it is when he's got enough service time to be a free agent that the Giants can sign him and show everybody what he needs to do to start. Because just to say, well, we tried. I mean, how many times do we have to try to give Liberatore a chance to start? It's bogus. It's not true. This shouldn't count. It should be like in a jury trial. The judge said, yeah, strike that. Jury, you didn't hear that. That never happened. The Cardinals, when evaluating whether Matthew Liberatore can start, this should be struck from the record. These 3 starts that he just had should be completely eradicated from the record because it was under duress, and it should not have happened this way if this was how quickly they were going to abandon it. And look, I'm not saying that they can't abandon it and have it be a good idea, because look where they are in the standings. They're 20-26. Is that their record? They don't have time, but that's because of the other mistakes in roster building and they haven't left themselves the wiggle room to have a guy pitch through something every 5th day. And it would be different if it was a guy just struggling to pitch well, but he was at least giving you or had the ability to give you 85, 90 pitches, but he's not built up. So every pitch he makes becomes all the more scrutinized because you don't have that many more to give in that given outing. It's just not a recipe. It's just not a recipe for success. And when you think about back to February, asked about the depth, Mo's answer was, we like the 5. We hope that the 5 can go. I know, I'm sure you do, but that's not realistic to think that the 5 are going to be able to go. Never in the case of an MLB season does it end up playing out that way where the 5 you have are able to go. It's a nice thing to say. It sounds good to say, But I just don't think it was realistic to see that the Cardinals would have a season where Steven Matz is in your rotation, so that's already a guy that you really don't expect to make 30-plus starts. It's not, at this point, it's not mean to say. It's just what it is. He just hasn't been able to be that guy. And so they did. They went out and got guys that they thought they could supplement the rotation with workhorse caliber guys. And it worked to an extent. Like Kyle Gibson has done his job in that regard. Sonny Gray had the hamstring, but otherwise is doing that. Lance Lynn hasn't been as efficient, so he's not getting as deep into games and giving you the innings you want. But he's going to take the ball every fifth day. That's going to be the case. I asked Mozeliak more about some of the guys that they went out and got and the characteristics of them being workhorses. Here was the quote he gave me back in February, that same day as the audio we just played from Jim the Cat Hayes, and his question. Said they went out and got guys that this is, quote, guys that understand what it's like to go pull to pull, who have the understanding of what it's like to have to take the ball for 30 starts. All these guys have been through that. They understand it. That's just going to be really helpful, too, with some of our younger pitchers that are trying to get to that point. Yeah, it's nice in theory, and I do think in some regard they have improved the way that they would go about that. Like, you get a Kyle Gibson, he's doing that. But all five of them haven't. You've got the injury to Gray to begin the year, and now who knows with Steven Matz. So you're going to need depth. To say we hope the five can go was never realistically going to happen that way. They've been caught in between on this Liberatore thing, and I think if they would have picked a lane and stuck to it weeks ago, they'd be better off for it now. But instead, they still don't have an answer in the fifth spot in the rotation. They've kind of sucked the life out of Matthew Liberatore a little bit. The confidence has got to be lower than it would have been if he had just been plugging along, successful in a bullpen role. And now you've strained the rest of your bullpen as well. Guys who otherwise might not have had to worry about whether they'd be up or down because they were performing well enough in their role, but they just had to eat so much crap today that the Cardinals might decide to send one or two of them down. Ryan Fernandez has a 3.2 ERA. I don't think that 2 innings from him, 30 pitches, is going to put him on the chopping block. He had 4 Ks, too, in the 2 innings. He just gave up a homer, gave up a couple of runs. But Nick Robertson, man, I think they're shooting themselves in the foot if they send him down, because outside of today, numbers have been pretty good. And even with what he gave you today was 3 innings. Somebody had to pitch those innings. Couple runs he gave up. ERA is at 4.38, but he threw 58 pitches. That's the kicker. Is a guy throws 58 pitches and he's a short burst reliever, typically, you're probably not seeing Robertson for a few days anyway, so they might just decide to send him down. I don't know if it's him, if it's Roycroft, based on just kind of general performance. He wasn't sharp today. If it's Liberatore, I don't know what it ends up being. I know there's probably going to have to be a move, though. It would just stand to reason. So that's the take on the pitching stuff. Offensively, the Cardinals took a step back a little bit on Sunday, for sure. Only 6 hits compared to they had consistently been getting you 9 or 10 plus in basically for a week straight. We talked about last night how they were second in OPS for the previous 7 days across Major League Baseball. And today, not as much. Lars Nootbaar hit a home run. Good to see him continuing to light it up at the plate and come to life. He's up to 734 on the OPS. Definitely good to see from him. 15 strikeouts, by the way, collectively by the Cardinal lineup today. It was not as productive of a day. Brandon Crawford, he got the start at shortstop. I know people were excited about that. 0 for 3, 1K, 0.97 batting average on the season. I don't know. Defensively, a little bit of weirdness there between him and Arenado on that one play. I think they ruled it a hit, a triple. It should have been an error on somebody. I think probably Arenado called him off, so I'm not really going to pin that one on Crawford, but not a lot of productivity from the offensive side of things for Crawford still. He was hitting sub 100 in mid-May. But he started the game. Nolan Gorman was on the bench to begin the game as well. He did have a pinch hit late in the game, or pinch hit at bat. He didn't get a hit. He struck out. But you sit Gorman, you sit Mason Wynn. That's the one that people are probably most upset about. How many times have we seen it, man? And I want to know, I'm not going to look it up because I'm already kind of over time on the podcast. I was trying to keep it short today. I want to know how many times Brandon Crawford has started on a Sunday specifically and then you look and see the Cardinals are 1-7 now on Sundays. Look, the balance of getting guys rest versus going for the jugular and trying to sweep a series, which, again, they had a chance to sweep. They didn't do it. They haven't been able to get a sweep yet this year. They've had, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 chances to do it going into a finale, and they've lost all of those, which is bonkers, but that's the way it's gone. So the balance is always going to be easy to complain about because Oli Marmol has to try and strike the balance, but it's never going to be visible to the fans to credit when a manager actually gets that balance right in terms of rest versus keeping your best lineup in there and getting the most out of guys. Like, I've seen Cardinals fans complain over the years about running the corpse of Paulie D out there every day when it's clear that he's run down, he needs a day, and that was like a trope for a long, long time. And it wasn't just DeYoung. They did it back with Aledmys Diaz. I mean, this goes back to previous managers. But Cardinals fans always harp on that, and maybe rightfully so, because, you know, you should be able to recognize when a guy is just lifeless out there and needs a breather. On the other side of it, though, you have a young player like Masyn Winn getting lots and lots of extra days off this year when he should theoretically be in the prime of his physical condition, 21, 22 years old, whatever he is. And so that's what fans harp on. They're like, why can't he just play every day? It does seem to be a lot of times on Sundays that it happens, but I think like the combo of a day game after a night game is often why you're going to see that. And I will say this. I was in the shade at Busch today. I meant to talk about this earlier. I said I was going to and never did. We took my son, my father-in-law, mother-in-law, my niece sang in the class that did the national anthem before the game, so that's why we were there. And I said, yeah, I'll go and support and not do it for work. We'll go for fun, and I'll bring my boy. And he did pretty good. He's not quite 2 years old yet, but he did okay. And thank God we were up in the shade, though, because it was hot and sticky out there. And again, I was shaded, and still I was like, I needed a nap when I got home. Sometimes that first 90-degree day of the summer is one that I think internally a team could look at. And again, I wasn't covering this game, so I don't know. But it would shock me to know that they're kind of keeping an eye on that and going, all right, to ensure guys are not overly exposed, this is going to be that first real hot game, and it's a day game after a night game, and we've got 2 guys in Masyn Winn and Nolan Gorman, too, with a history of back problems. And the other one that sat was Ivan Herrera, who he's not going to catch a day game after a night game anyway at this point in his career. You probably could have DH'd him if you wanted him in there. But it's like you can at least explain day game after night game, really hot for the first time this summer, sticky, humid, guys with pre-existing back situations that you want to be able to manage. Like, I'm not defending in isolating these decisions and saying, no, Oli actually got it right, because I don't know. I couldn't know all of the things that they're weighing with these individual decisions. A baseball season is 162 games, and if we're going to harp on every individual start sit, we're going to drive ourselves crazy. I know that's what we do because we're talking daily podcasts and we're ravenous there in the fan base. I get it. But I'm just trying to add the context to, like, maybe there could have been some reasons. Just like the last time when everybody lost their mind when Masyn Winn wasn't starting, and it's like he sat basically once per series and people were freaking out. 2 days later, it came out that he was dealing with a back injury, and they were really trying to manage him and be careful. So remember that happened. Try to avoid saying anything too crazy and making any bold Like, I saw one of the singular dumbest posts I've ever seen on Facebook was in one of those Cardinals Nation groups, and somebody said, it was a fan that posted and said, I'm normally a supporter of Oli, but to sit these 3 guys today is a fireable offense. That is not how any of this works. I understand you're upset about the loss, but that's just not the case. Was it right to sit so many prominent players at once? Maybe not, but it's like Nolan Gorman has struggled right this year. Now he's starting to come around, which could be a reason that you want to keep his bat in that lineup. Masyn Winn, look, I was at the game today. I certainly would have preferred to at least see Masyn Winn play some shortstop defense instead of Crawford. But I also look at it and go, there could have been some stuff going on. So I'm not going to go crazy about that. I can understand the frustration, though. Like I said, I'm not defending it. I'll give the context to it. It's brutal to be 1-7 on Sundays. And those are the days to close out the weekend series. Sometimes you close out a homestand or a road trip. And the Cardinals to not be able to get it done is a problem. It's a big problem. But, like, does a more aggressive lineup today, kind of like the Liberatore thing, where you say, hey, we're going to be aggressive and and say, this guy can do it, we're going to give him a shot. But then when it backfires, like let's say you start your guys, but one of them gets hurt or he has a cramp or you can't manage that way, I understand, but there are a lot of considerations that they have to keep in mind that we don't as the public. They got to manage these guys personally rather than just, hey, numbers on a page, why can't he be out there? I don't know. There might have been a reason, there might not have been. I don't think it's why the Cardinals lost. I think more than anything, it's the culmination of some rough processes on the pitching side that got him today. As Liberatore got the start, but he was never destined to make it very deep into this game. And, they fell a little bit flat offensively compared to what they had been doing. That made for another classic Sunday game in 2024 where the Cardinals, they're out of the thing pretty early. Red Sox scored in 5 of the first 6 innings in today's game. They also put up a couple in the 9th. 6 of 9 innings they scored. It's rough. It was a rough one, and so we definitely, we here at B-Schaeff Daily regret the headline of our video yesterday of "Don't let the Cardinals get hot," because they were hot on the field, 90 degrees, but their play was not as hot on Sunday. Cardinals lose it 11-3. Once again, squandering a potential chance to sweep and just kind of mired in 6-game below 500 land as you take a couple steps forward, but then you take one back. And I saw a comment that said, look, if they win 2 out of every 3, that's like a 90-win pace. That's fantastic. It would be for any team starting the season at the beginning of April. It'd be awesome. But this Cardinals team they built themselves a 9-game deficit compared to 500. They were 9 games under, and then they started doing the 2 of 3. Right? They won the final game against Milwaukee. They win 2 of 3 against the Angels, 2 of 3 against the Red Sox. It's going to take a long time if you can't ever rack up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins in a row. Just get one sweep even. Like, it's going to take a hell of a long time to be able to see the Cardinals get back into a real competitive state within the NL Central. Yeah, the wild card's always going to be there. But that's why I say, like, when you have a chance to sweep and you don't do it and you're 1 for 7 and being able to close out series on Sundays, that is a reflection that I think should be paid attention to. It's not that I'm ripping them for winning series. The bigger picture, that's true. But I think it's okay to be a little bit impatient to only ever win 2 of 3 because you're incrementally, they go a week, they win 2 of 3, they win 2 of 3, they have 1 day off. That's 4 out of 6. That's great. You've gained 2 games in the standings. If you gain 2 games in the standings every week for the next 6 weeks, all right, now you're in the mix, right? By then it's going to be July, but you'd be in the mix if you did that consistently every single time. But you know what's inevitable to happen? They're going to lose a series at some point too. So let's say that over those 6 weeks, instead of 4-2 every single week, just 2 of the weeks, they lose one of the series that they play, right? Suddenly, over 6 weeks, what have you really gained but maybe a handful in the standings? Maybe by the beginning of July, you're to 500 doing that. And by the way, don't take for granted that doing that, just winning 2 out of every 3 for eternity, is not easy to do. Heaven forbid, then maybe they get swept once, and suddenly all of that progress that you gained is gone because you're never able to step on the throat, curb stomp them for a series sweep. That's all I'm saying. It's not that 2 of 3 is bad. It's that when you're set up to be 3 of 3 and you never get it, and you're 6 games under 500, so you're really taking a lot more time than you'd like to get back on the right track and to be at 500, above 500, head above water. Again, that you're one slip up away, you're one little backslide from all that progress that you took weeks and weeks and weeks to accrue because you were having to just slog it out 2 of 3 every way. Suddenly all that could go away and you could be right back down where you were, 9, 10 games under 500 going, what the hell happened? So being able to play as good in your strong times as you do bad in your weak times, like you lose 7 in a row. If you don't win 7 in a row, it's going to take a long time to make up for that. And that's a thing the Cardinals have done within the last couple of weeks. That happened. So that's why it's more incumbent upon them than it would be your standard team to go for the jugular and get some sweeps, and they haven't been able to do it. All right, now we're going to wrap things up there for this edition of B-Schaeff Daily, and I feel very badly because I have been mentioning the YouTube membership, the channel membership, at youtube.com/@B-Schaeffer12. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer. More folks have been joining the B-Schaeff Daily gang, and I am going to, next podcast, remember to shout these guys out a little earlier in the podcast because I waited till the end. Rena, Jared, Austin, Andrew, thank you all for joining. Brett and Ken did the day before that. I think I've mentioned all those folks. Thank you guys for hopping into the channel membership. And again, the folks who just joined, I'll shout you out at the beginning tomorrow. I'm sorry for waiting until the end when some people have probably tuned out after having to listen to me talk for so long. They probably gave up. So I will make sure to give those guys shout outs once again tomorrow. But lots of cool perks. Check it out. The link is in the description if you would like to become a member of the B-Schaeff Daily gang, which sounds like kind of ridiculous, but the more I say it, the more it makes me laugh and grows on me that I called it that. So we might just keep that being the name of it. But you can check out the link in the description if you're interested in that. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys so much for listening as always, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.